Hi, this is Mrs. Solomon, and we are getting ready to discuss Genesis chapter 4, the story of Cain and Abel. Remember that this story is contained in Genesis chapters 1 through 11, and in chapters 1 through 11 is the primeval story, where the ancient Israelites are attempting to discuss and show how things came to be. Remember, not all questions will be answered, but by all means, let's ask them and try to get to the heart of the issue. So let's get started. If you have not read chapter 4 yet, please stop the screencast and go ahead and read chapter 4 so that you can see the flow of the story. But this is how it begins in chapter 4 about Eve knowing, now the man knew his wife Eve, and they conceived and bore Cain. And she mentions that she has produced a man with the help of the Lord, which is what Cain means. So this is sort of an etiological story. And then she bore his brother Abel. Notice that Abel is the younger one, and throughout the Old Testament text, you will see that there is generally a favoring by God of the younger versus the older. Notice that there is also a difference in terms of the occupations of the brothers. Abel is a shepherd, Cain was a farmer. So already you have this theme of sibling rivalry that's introduced. Number one, by their occupations. It was thought in ancient Israel, particularly during the time of the monarchy, that shepherding was the favored occupation. And so you get rivalry there, as well as the rivalry between the older and the younger. And you'll see that theme of sibling rivalry spoken of often in the Hebrew Bible. And so as we move along, both Cain and Abel brought forth an offering to the Lord. But God did not like Cain's offering. He preferred Abel's offering. We don't know why God rejected Cain's offering. There are lots of theories that are out there. Possibly that Cain did not bring his best. That is an option. But we really don't know why God rejected Cain's offering. He could have been favoring Abel because he was a sheep herder, or because he was younger. We just don't know. In any event, it says Cain was very angry and his countenance fell, or the look on his face fell as a result of God rejecting Cain's offering. And so God says to him and confronts him and says, well, why are you angry? If you do well, you'll be accepted. But if you don't do well, he says, sin is lurking at the door. And so we were introduced to sin in Genesis chapter 3 with the sin of Adam and Eve. It's introduced here again. This time, God says that sin's desire is for you, but you must master it. So he says that sin is something that can be controlled. It's something on the inside, and it doesn't have to control you. Yet, here it appears to have taken over Cain. Cain does not master it, and he conspires to kill his younger brother Abel, and out of apparent envy, he kills him. So as we go along, here comes the Lord. And he says, where is your brother Abel? And of course, here's a familiar refrain, am I my brother's keeper? Now, if you look at these verses, in verses 9 through 12, the word brother is mentioned 4 times. If you extend this out into verse 8, it's mentioned 6 times. So the fact that Cain murders his brother, and this word brother is mentioned several times in a few verses, emphasizes the egregious nature of Cain's actions. This is the first murder, and it is fratricide. That makes it even worse. Not that there is degrees of murder, but the fact that you murder your brother is not a cool thing at all. Yet, the Lord says, what have you done? Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground. And so as punishment, God curses Cain and forces Cain to become a wanderer on the earth. It's not over, though, because Cain does not view his punishment as fair. He says, "Today you have driven me from the soil, and I shall be hidden from your face. I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer on the earth, and anyone who meets me may kill me." The Lord says no, and he says, "I will protect you." And he put a mark on Cain so that no one who came upon him would kill him. So Cain receives mercy from God. Here's the ironic part. Cain doesn't give his brother any mercy. He kills him out of his rage and out of his envy. So God has mercy on him. Yet and still there is always punishment for sin, no matter what. You don't ever get away with it. You see that all throughout the Hebrew Bible. I take that back. That's not entirely true. It depends on what's being emphasized, because you will see in the patriarchal history or the patriarchal story, particularly with Abraham, that he does engage in some storytelling, some fib telling, and it seems that he gets away with it. But that's a different type of story. So here, as Cain is driven away from the presence of the Lord, alienated from God, he still receives God's mercy. So we see here that the first murder is a continuation of what has begun in the Garden of Eden. I'm going to ask you a question about that at the end of this screencast very shortly. So the account continues now in chapter 4. It says Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And so in verses 17 through 18, what you have here is a genealogy. In the book of Genesis, genealogies are expressions of blessing, where God says, "Be fruitful and multiply." Well, here's evidence, in fact, that that has happened, that God is blessing the human population right now. But yet and still, you can see here that here's Lamech. He took 2 wives, and notice that he, as he helps to reproduce, verse 20, Ada bore Jabal. He was the ancestor of those who lived in tents and have livestock. And then he has a brother, and it says he was the ancestor of all those who play the lyre and the pipe. And then Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who made all kinds of bronze and iron tools. So what's going on here is that culture and technology is rapidly developing. You've got musicians, you've got metal workers, you've got people that are engaged in all types of occupations. So culture and technology is rapidly developing. However, so is sin, so is violence. As a matter of fact, Lamech killed a man for only wounding him. So with the increase in population, with being fruitful and multiplying, sin is abounding. And that's going to have some implications later on. Again, Adam knew his wife, and she bore a son and named him Seth, for she said, "God has appointed for me another child instead of Abel, because Cain killed him." And then at that time, people began to invoke the name of the Lord, which means they began to worship Yahweh, worshiping the Lord. So this account, while you can see you've got sibling rivalry, you've got murder a couple of times, yet you have this increase in culture and technology. So here's a question. How is the story of Cain and Abel similar to the story of Adam and Eve? What I'd like for you to do is just sort of jot down some notes, maybe divide your paper in half and jot down those similarities, and we will discuss those in class. All right, that ends this screencast for today, and we will see you in class.